Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the New World Order. Inside the Borg and outside the hive mind, this is Rex Bear bringing you the cutting edge in news that is deemed too controversial for the brain-drained media, and yet just enough to keep your minds busy. Since most of you that listen to Leak Project are smarter than the average Joe and Jane. We shall refer to tonight's episode as The Truman Show meets Tron Matrix. We certainly live in amazing times, don't we? Often, people realize the media is controlled by only a handful of megacorporations. But do they also realize most of the educational industry, chemical industries, food industries, pharmaceutical industries, defense industries, even the majority of scientific research is controlled by only a handful of corporations? Some of these megacorps' profits and yearly revenues outweigh countries by billions of dollars. The whole world truly is a stage. Oftentimes people say you must choose a side, and by choosing a side, are you feeding the machine that powers this dualistic matrix most refer to as their daily lives? Could there be another option? Is it possible to unplug from the black ecstasy beast Borg system? Some of the most profitable industries on the planet today profit from lies, deceit, imbalance, destruction, and energy towards hate, division, and illusion. Don't agree? Look at the profit margins involved with pharmaceuticals. Oftentimes, the same drugs cause more damage and problems to the participant than they had prior. How much money does the medical industrial complex rake in every year? What about the chemical companies like Monsanto that help blanket the earth with poisons and toxic chemicals linked to a wide cornucopia of diseases and ailments? Look at the big six that control 90% of the programming, aka entertainment industry. How do these industries profit? While the mainstream media pushes transgender bathrooms, world wrestling politicians acting and jockeying for a position in the bleak house, children are getting arrested for burping in class and suspended for the remainder of the school year in New Mexico. People are turning into lemmings. Have you seen the new Pokemon Go craze? You've got people following artificial relics inside of a 5-inch screen on their phone. Getting in fistfights almost with people at veterans' cemeteries because they don't like seeing it turned into a circus. It just blows my mind. And then you go to some of these mainstream news headlines. For example, if you go to MSNBC right now and you look at the top stories from NBC News and MSNBC. I mean, this is the kind of stuff that makes me think of Idiocracy. Let me give you a rundown here. Their number one headline is, "What would it take for the GOP to rebuke Trump?" And then it's, "Gold Star families demand apology from Trump." And then you go to Fox News, and if you read some of the stuff on their front page here, it's all about Clinton. 4 Pinocchios, fact checker, slams Clinton over claim in email scandal. Video, Clinton fact checked on truthful claim in email scandal. Reaction to criticism over Hillary Clinton's statement. It's like two sides of the same coin here. The media's spinning people up on both sides, and they're playing these wag the dog pony games. Most of this stuff doesn't really matter anyway. Where's the real news? Stuff that really matters. Does anybody think that those that are going to be put into the bleak house are actually going to get there based on your vote? Do you think your vote really matters? Jason, it's great to have you on the show with us. How the heck are you?
Doing good, Rex. How you doing?
Oh, I'm doing fantastic. I'm actually looking at an article right now in the Wall Street Journal that says Melania Trump speech used same passages as Michelle Obama's 2008 address. And I listened to that speech, and parts of the speech were exactly the same, identical. Now, if that doesn't make you think we live in the Twilight Zone / Truman Show, lay off the fluoride. What do you think about this kind of stuff and what I was talking about before I brought you on?
Well, I think that's the stuff that people need to be aware of. They don't realize that, the bigger issue and the stuff they hide, it's all about where the camera's pointed, so to speak. And, like you said, wag the dog scenarios. Have you noticed how how political people get around election time?
Oh yeah, it's amazing.
It's amazing. Yeah, you go to your Facebook and you see all these crazy things, and then you ask them, what? Give me some political views or answers. Like, can you give me some answers to some of the problems in the country today? And nobody has answers, and it's funny. No, everybody's so on the fence, it's exactly what they want. You know?
It is exactly what they want. And it's funny because if you just go back a few years, and there was an article that was recently posted on theatlantic.com by Connor Friedersorf. I apologize if I got your last name wrong there, Connor. It's titled, "When Donald Trump Lavished Praise on Hillary Clinton." And I actually brought this up a couple of times before, and I've been saying since the beginning that I think they're kind of playing WWE tactics on the TV screen, but behind the scenes they're helping each other out, in my opinion. And you see these videos that come out where Trump essentially several years ago was bragging about how they were friends and how Hillary's a good person and how amazing she is, essentially. And it's not that way anymore. So if he's changed his mind so much in just a few years, and people say, well, you know, he's seen the light and he wants to help us, and you just kind of look at what he said several years ago versus what's going on now, and that, in my opinion, is also like, okay, the whole world is a stage. You know, they're reading the same script, they're saying the same speeches, and then if you read the articles, like, well, you know, they were plagiarizing each other and blah blah. It doesn't add up unless you realize they're probably working in on it together. I mean, what are the interests behind the scenes? Where does Trump has his investments, and how are they being benefited from Hillary? And if she gets in office, you know, what is going to be the implications for Trump and his corporations?
To me, it's all like a big census. It's almost like a way to see that they go left wing, right wing, you know, Democratic, Republican, and then they see where the public's going and where they can lead you towards the overall agenda, and see which wing of the eagle they want to fly with for the next 4 years, so to speak. I feel like that's how it's been for at least since the 40s. You know, I don't know how long it's been that way, but you can definitely tell that it's the stagery and just the, like you said, it's like watching wrestling when you're watching the DNC and the RNC. It's weird, totally weird. It's never been like this extravagant before. You know, out of the past couple years that I've been watching it, or you can even look up videos on it. It's pretty funny.
And I certainly feel that at the mid levels and those that are politicians and in Congress and stuff like that, when you've got the Republican side and the Democrat side, I'm sure that there's many of them that don't jive and don't want to be in the same room together. You know, kind of like the football teams. If you're a, I don't know, University of Tennessee fan versus Alabama or something like that, you know, you're going to have some debate. You're going to have some people that don't agree with things and want the other team to win, etc. Yet I think at the very top levels and close to the top levels, the people that are funding these politicians and lobbyists have the same agenda. So,
yeah,
right, and let me just say something real quick, too. I mean, let's go to an article on BusinessInsider.com, and there was an article put together called "These 6 Corporations Control 90% of the Media in America" by Ashley Lutz. And you can see that these graphs that are put together are just incredible, and the graphs were actually put together by somebody by the name of Jason at Frugal Dad. But let me explain this to you guys. In 1983, 90% of the American media was owned by 50 companies. In 2011, that same 90% is controlled by 6 companies. Well, who are the 6 big players? You've got GE, News Corp, Disney, Viacom, Time Warner, and CBS. And then if you look at the amount of media executives within these 6 corporations, and this was several years ago, there was 232 at that time. And then if you look at over 277 million Americans, that means one media exec has influence over 850,000 people, what they're watching on TV and what their subconscious mind is getting programmed with. Why do you think they call it programming, folks? You can look at some of the psychological data, and you can even see MRI scans. When somebody watches an event take place, a part of their brain activates, the same part of the brain that if somebody is actually experiencing that event take place, if they're actually a part of that event, the same part of their brain activates as well. So, you know, they can use Hollywood and media, entertainment, programming for a wide variety of mind control opportunities for these guys. And not only just the influence of the overall archetype of people's personalities, what you buy, what you think when you go to the grocery store, what you talk about to your friends. The influence is mind-boggling, and this is just in the media. And we're going to talk about some other industries that are controlled by just a handful of people as well here in a moment. But I want to get your take on this, Jason. If you really think about it, 6 corporations and 232 people that control over 90% of what you see and hear about. What are the implications of something like that?
It's you can see it, how it's just grown like a monster, and that's the idea of it even with the parent companies is it's crazy because that's how they get us here. It's like the idea of this American dream being privatized instead of the government running everything, and we get basically equal or less services than other places where government provides the services, and then the prices go up and up and up, and basically the politicians are in the pockets of these big companies, and these companies don't have our best interest in the people's best interest involved. If so, when you think about it, a government is supposed to have its people's best interest involved. It'd be better in some scenarios to have like free healthcare and things like that, but to have like a conglomerate, just like 6 companies that trick you through owning 5 or 6 other subsidiaries and making you think that it's all fair and balanced, and they're spending all this millions of dollars on PR campaigns to make you think it's fair and balanced, then it's obvious when you see the numbers. 90% of the media is owned by 6 companies.
You guys got to, yeah, it's crazy. People need to just look at the teleprompter or the spokesperson that's actually reading from the teleprompter essentially on any of these mainstream news sites, and you can see a lot of times their eyes are bouncing back and forth. And the so-called experts that come on the show, you really look into who these experts are, and you can't even find them. They just come up with these names and titles, or like, oh, this guy's a professor from Timbuktu, and he's got a specialist degree in nanotechnology with biographic astrophysics, and he's an absolute genius with 48 degrees, and he speaks 117 languages, and he's going to talk to us today about economics. How you doing, sir? Oh, yeah, I'm doing great. What are we going to do now? There's so much going on today. It's just people are like, oh, look at this guy. Look at this tile that he's got. It's amazing. It blows my mind. And let's get into the media again here for a minute. If you look at the 6 big companies back in 2010, the total revenue was over $275 billion. Now, that's more than many countries. That's more than many countries, you guys. Entire countries. Tens of millions of people. You're talking about a couple hundred execs combined with the stockholders and the employees down the line, etc. The amount of influence that the entertainment industry has is absolutely mind-blowing. So think about oftentimes when you are going to do something and you're wondering, okay, how should I do this? And then you think back in your mind about something you've seen on TV before. Do you ever do that, Jason?
Yeah, for sure. It's natural, it's almost like you recollect memories that you didn't have almost from TV sometimes.
It's wild.
In the same sense. Yeah. In the same sense.
And not only that, there's over 170 million people that read news every single month from one company.
It's crazy when you think about it, because just like you said, these places own more than some countries. And when you think about all the countries that are really poor, they're like the richest countries in the world with resources. Think about that. It's the same thing. Same thing's going on. Only a couple people are controlling all of this. It's basically ours. It's all of ours. And they're controlling, the people's share. It's crazy.
It is. And not only that, let's get into radio for a minute. Back in the 90s, FCC forbid companies to own over 40 stations. Now, if you look at Clear Channel, it owns 1,200 stations, every single one in Minot, North Dakota. Yeah, there's no monopoly there, folks.
Yeah. Yeah, for sure. That's how they hide it. It's these subsidiaries, and they basically can compete with each other through the parent company. It's crazy. It's crazy.
And then let's take that even a step further. If you get into the academic oligarchy, there's a great website called globalresearch.ca, and you can read this article that shows, it has a breakdown of how just 6 companies control the majority of science publishing. Think about that for a minute. Think about the implications of that, folks. Almost everything you read in the scientific community is controlled by just 6 companies. What are these 6 companies? I'll tell you right now. ACS, Chemistry for Life, Sage, Taylor and Francis, Springer, Reed Elsevier, Wiley Blackwell, and then all of their subsidiaries. There's just a ton of them. And you can go to naturalnews.com and actually read about this. It's just, there's so much data out there you guys can find for yourselves. And then if you realize, okay, the scientific community is controlled by just a few corporations. The media is controlled by a few corporations. In a minute, we're going to get into the educational literature that's given to children from grades kindergarten through 12th grade. There's just a few companies that control the majority of that. So where does this all lead? What are your thoughts, Jason?
I mean, it leads to like an Orwellian society, like the books that you read back in school that they even teach you to read, and it's part of the curriculum. If you want a good example of what's going on, look at China right now. Any independent media, what me and you are doing right now, if we were doing it in China, is illegal. Independent media is completely outlawed over there as of a couple days ago. Crazy. So that shows you. I mean, they can't. That's illegal for people like John Moore or you or anybody to get on their show and do anything outside of a script, basically. That's public news right now. That people can look that up. They're not as blatant here in America unless you look at the facts, and you're basically giving us the facts. All this stuff you gave me, I'm kind of glad you sent me these links, actually.
I mean, I sent you probably 24 links. For example, here's another article that was put together by Sean Williams on the Motley Fool, 11 largest companies by market cap in pharmaceuticals here. So these websites that I'm bringing up to you guys, these aren't conspiracy forum websites that are full of, woo-woo. And oftentimes there's some good woo-woo out there that's a lot more legit than people think at the top levels, or, as far as the majority of people kind of tend to think if you're bringing something up that's outside of the box, it couldn't be true. Yet many times truth is stranger than fiction. Although I oftentimes find that there is a opposite of everything, right? You've got the polar opposite, and in the media, industries, topics, genres, you've got the anti-topic of everything. So I usually feel there's a balance somewhere in the middle. You've got people that say there's no such thing as people causing an effect of the environment with the earth. You can pollute it as much as you want. You can frack as much as you want. You can burn as much coal as you want, and it's not going to affect the earth at all. And then you have people that say all of the effects today that we see are because of humans. I don't think it's either of those. I think that there's somewhere in the middle. If you go back to the 40s and 50s and 30s and 20s and you look at New York City, the amount of smog and pollution that was out there because of the coal and other stuff that was burnt, it was like Beijing almost. I mean, maybe not as much of the toxic plastics and other stuff that's used in some of the computer chips and other plastic chemicals and stuff, but you guys get my point. Now, let's also look at some of these pharmaceutical companies, such as Johnson & Johnson, worth $279 billion market value. Now, let's compare that to the gross domestic product of many countries like Ireland. It's worth more than Ireland or Colombia as far as gross domestic product. One company. We're talking more than multiple countries like Finland, Portugal, Vietnam, Greece, Venezuela, Czech Republic, Romania, Algeria, Iraq, Hungary, Kazakhstan, New Zealand, Puerto Rico, Ecuador, Ukraine. I could go on. Dominican Republic. That one company is worth more than these countries. It's crazy. But we need to believe everything they tell us, and we need to continue to buy their products. And if we think that they're lying to us, then we're conspiracy theorists because these think tanks tell us we are, right, Jason?
That's exactly right. You can actually look that up. They told basically anybody that came up with anything against what the mainstream media said was conspiracy theorists, and that was the term to be given.
You have a psychological condition.
Exactly. Exactly. And when you really look at the facts, it's you have a psychological condition if you can look at these facts and not make something out of it. These are the facts they're giving us. So think about the real facts, the charts that with the hidden budgets basically and the black spending and all that, you realize this is just a military industrial complex, and basically the media just helps push it. It's just a tool of that almost. It gets us behind buying and the manipulation of the market and everything. When you realize that it's supposed to be a fair and equal market that kind of balances and checks itself, and it's completely not. It's manipulated like a puppet. Then you should be pretty angry. In reality, it's just not fair. We got the odds stacked against us, but you gotta keep positive, I guess. And
here's another thing too, right, Jay? Here's another thing I want to add to that, Jason. If you look at a website, media.nationalpriorities.org, you can pull up the proposed $4.1 trillion spending budget for 2016 in the United States. And if you break this down into a chart, well, you've got 27% in the medical and health industry, 16% in the military. You've got veterans benefits of 4%, food and agriculture 3%, transportation 3%, education 2%. Education 2%, yeah. And then you look into energy and environment, 1%. Okay, science, 1%. So if you take education, and housing and community, another 2%. If you take the majority of these industries and add them up, they won't even equal what the military is receiving. And that's on the books. What about the black budget stuff that's not even put on the books? And the medical and health industries that are just $1.1 trillion out of a $4.1 trillion budget. And you look at where all that money goes. Is it helping anybody, really? I mean, yes, there's a few pharmaceutical drugs out there that might have some benefits over. I mean, of course, there's stuff people have to take. I don't even want to get into that. I'm not going to get into any health recommendations or anything like that, but you guys can read the labels on this stuff. When I lost a very close family member because they were on 12 medications because they believed everything the doctor told them, and instead of exercising and instead of the doctor saying, okay, why don't you do this exercise or maybe go on a diet or eat healthy? No, just here's another pill, here's another pill, here's another pill, here's another pill. One of the pills he was on had an FDA warning label on it, basically organ failure, and it cooked his body. It cooked his organs internally, essentially is what happened to him, and he's no longer with us. So instead of taking that $1 trillion and pushing it down the throats of the weak that buy these pharmaceutical drugs because they have some ailment or disease and the doctor gives them another pill to offset one problem and create 4 others, essentially, oftentimes, that could be completely transferred and transformed into a system of helping people. I mean, there's a lot of, how many doctors have been suicided or had some mysterious death over the past couple years because of their links to exposing stuff in the vaccines and the cancer treatments that are out there for the masses, and then they're coming out with stuff that's actually helping people, and then they end up dead. Well, this is what happens in the wonderful world of the Matrix meets the Truman Show, in my opinion, oftentimes. Now, people are starting to break out of this Matrix, and we got to focus on the positive, because even though we're living in a time that seems to be bipolar, where there's a lot of dark stuff going on around us, if we go back 50 years, 100 years, 200 years, 1,000 years, I think we've got it a lot better now in many cases than people did back then. I mean, you go a few hundred years ago, if somebody called you a witch or a warlock, you'd be burnt at the stake, and you see the torture chambers they had in the medieval times. I mean, that stuff would far surpass any waterboarding that goes on now, right?
Yeah, it's when you think about how they changed this machine, and they never really had any good opposition, because when you think about it, it's always been controlled opposition. Right now, if there's ever been a time that we could actually stand up kind of against this machine and actually make a difference, it's now. You can tell the time. That's why they're so frantic about their and blatant almost, about their decisions anymore. It seems like they're coming to a change of power. They know that they're kind of losing ground, if you will, and they're kind of doing like power plays almost. And as you said, all these people are waking up. If you kind of expose the head, then the whole machine fails. There's nobody's going to buy into it anymore, and the whole system would just fall. We'd go through some rough times in a transition like that, but it's what's needed. I mean, there's ways that we could transition our government into out of a slave system, basically. The history's repeated itself. I mean, they've gone as far as even killing their own presidents. So you can't say they won't stoop to any levels, anything like that. But I think we need to stay positive, like you said, basically, and just kind of come together any way we can.
Well, and then here's another thing, too. If you look at, let's get into the major educational publishers, the big 3. You've got Pearson, which is a British-based company. You've got McGraw-Hill and Houghton Mifflin Harcourt. Probably said that wrong, but hey, close enough. So those are the 3 big players in virtually the majority of the educational materials that are given to people in school, in public school. So, who's controlling that material? Who's giving them the information to put in their publications? Is it the military? Is it the government? Who's giving them the information? That's another question. Now, let's also jump into this merger that's still possibly going to take place between Monsanto, people's favorite business, right? Everybody loves Monsanto. They love how they're blanketing the world with poisons and toxins, and now, people love Monsanto. And then you've got the ginormous corporation out of Germany, Bayer. If you look at that merger that might take place, well, Monsanto, they control the majority of the seeds, and they make so many chemicals that are sprayed over the crops in the world today. A lot of these chemicals are outlawed in other countries, but it's okay here at home because you are the guinea pig, folks. So what do you think about that merger? It hasn't happened yet, Jason, but do you think it could?
It's probably pre-decided if they're talking about it already. If it's in the public eyes, it's probably just, like I said, a beta test. So they do a lot of that anymore. With the social media, what's trending on Twitter, they can keep track of basically anything. They got this huge data compilation network. They could say something and then say, I'm kidding, 2 hours later, and basically reverse all of it,
Right.
What about, think about the thing on, like, when 9/11, when you found those 4 white guys like in the bombs on that bridge there in New York, and then it was completely erased from the media. Nobody heard another thing about it. Like, what? You see it on live TV. It's almost like the media wasn't too privy of some of the information at times either when these false flag events and crazy rituals happen.
Well, somebody knew about 9/11 because they were recording Tower 7. There was that anchor woman that had Tower 7 in the background, and she said that Tower 7 had collapsed, and it was still up. It was half an hour before it collapsed, so that was kind of funny. Now, I want to jump into Monsanto again because...
Sorry.
Oh, no, that's no problem at all. I just want to jump back to Monsanto because many people don't know that Monsanto actually made a bunch of Agent Orange for Vietnam more than 40 years ago. And if you go to Monsanto.com, you can actually even read about it. And they try and play it off as, yeah, you know, we made Agent Orange, but we don't have any, we're not bound to any of the implications because the government said it's okay. You know, we were one of the few companies that actually made Agent Orange for the war. And it talks about how it's made, and it is essentially made by a unique mixture of two common herbicides, 2,4-D and 2,4,5-T. And those are common herbicides, you guys. So think about this for a second. This stuff, if you go out and you're eating tortilla chips, if you're eating stuff that's got high fructose corn syrup in it, if it's genetically modified, which most of it is, guess what? It's got these chemicals in there. It's not good for you. It's not good for you to eat Agent Orange or something that makes Agent Orange, in my opinion. Now, hey, maybe I'm wrong here. You know, it could be good for you. So
no, you're wrong. You're right completely. There's no reason for if it kills animals and bugs like indefinitely, then there's a reason. It's a poison. It's a neurotoxin, and that's what it is. So yes, spray it on your fruit.
Do you know how many people I've met that were in Vietnam that get their blood tested every 6 months and have been affected in a very, how do I put this, in a not positive fashion, let's just put it that way, from being exposed to Agent Orange. So when you read this on the website where it says, oh, well, the government has actually helped people that were exposed to Agent Orange, but, you know, we can't find a connection really, so, you know, it could all just be swamp gas.
They underline only for the government. They're like, it was only used for the government to make you feel better about it, like you said, but that's the only word they highlight there. It's funny. They kind of tuck everything else around. Like, yeah, they totally pretty this up in any way they can. We call it Asian affairs and stuff.
Yeah, and they try and make it sound like they were just spraying it in Vietnam to get rid of weeds. You know, they had to cut down on the weeds out there in Vietnam to win the war. I mean, that's all it was. You guys, yes. I mean, there's a lot of weeds out there in Vietnam. I mean, they got to keep their yards looking good. They don't got time to pull those weeds, you know. They just got to blanket spray it so then that way they can win the war easier. I mean, just read about it on Monsanto's website. Now,
so they can ship heroin back easier. So it seemed like if you look at it in historically, it's like America lost its dope connection and the French connection, that whole thing, and that's basically was the whole push for that, I believe.
Oh, conspiracy theorist, once again, you're going to have to get some type of medical evaluation, Jason, because what you're talking about, just you better not think for yourself anymore.
Yeah, treason to the Patriot Act.
The force is strong with this one.
It's crazy, man.
Now, here's another website that I'm at right now, and this is pubs.usgs.gov. Decades of pesticide use have resulted in their widespread occurrence in streams and groundwater. Now, if you go to some samples with one or more pesticides in agricultural areas, this is on the website, fish, 85% have been exposed. Streams, 92%. Shallow groundwater, 59%. Now let's get into urban areas. Fish, 100%. Streams, 99%. Shallow groundwater, 49%. Mixed land use, fish, 96%. Major rivers, 100%. Major aquifers, 33%. You guys, 33%. Now, let's combine that with one of the most popular pesticides or herbicides used today in your food supply, folks, but it's totally healthy, okay? It's totally good for you. Glyphosate. Now, farmers and ranchers in the U.S. supplied an estimated 0.36 million kilograms of the active ingredient, 0.8 million pounds, in 1974. Now, if you look at 2014, it's 1,000 kilograms times 125,384. And do you know what that product basically is, you guys? That's Roundup. That's the main ingredient in Roundup. That means it's in the majority of the stuff that you eat. And drink. And bathe in. And if that isn't enough, well, just go inject yourself with the flu vaccine once or twice a year to make sure that you keep up on those flu shots because, it's good for you, as they say. But it's all for your best interest, folks. This is all because they love you, and it has nothing to do with any, controlled eugenics or this beast-like system that I talked about at the very beginning that feeds off of this black ecstasy. Now, let's look at some of the 30 commonly used pesticides here. I'm not going to name all of them. You've obviously got the 2,4-D. You've got the glyphosate, which is basically the main ingredient in Roundup. And if you look at some of the side effects, cancer, reproductive effects, neurotoxicity, kidney, liver damage, sensitizer, irritant, birth defects. Yeah, but it's all good for you. Although many countries have outlawed this kind of stuff, it's okay here at home. It's okay. Now, here's an article from the Wycliffe Journal by Curry Hilton. Glyphosate is the most widely used broad-spectrum systematic herbicide in the world. Monsanto primarily distributes glyphosate products in the business-to-business market through distributors, independent retailers and dealers, and agricultural cooperatives. This is just mind-blowing. And combined with the fact that now China's in the market, and they're doing their best to keep up with the prices, so they're coming out with this stuff at a super cheap price and offering it to the industries out here. So not only do we have the Roundups here that are made at home, which is bad enough, but who knows what's in the stuff made in China. China makes the majority of the vaccines now. They're invested heavily in the dairy industry, in a lot of the in the meat industry now out here.
We're talking billions of pounds of chemicals. Like, I don't think people really conceive what we're talking about. Billions of pounds of chemicals. That's crazy. It's crazy.
And what it's linked to is even more crazy.
Yeah. When you realize how much it's just built up since the 70s, and it's just gotten worse exponentially. I'm sitting here looking at the data. It's really... We should leave some of these links, definitely, maybe in the description or something for people to look at.
Yeah, let's leave the links. And let me ask you a question, Jason. With all of this information that we have now, what is a solution that we can present to the table to make a difference to help balance and get rid of this beast-like system in a positive, nonviolent manner?
Well, they designed it pretty crazy, man. It's like a seven-headed beast almost, man. You can't just cut one head. But it'd be definitely unify first. Definitely come together and be humble at first. And you have to get back to just maybe growing your own food once in a while, things like that, and not trusting to just throw all your money just away on buying something that's poison, basically, for one point of view. And then try to be a part of the political system. Why not? If you can, you elect your local officials. The big politicians, we may not have too much power with that, but if we could expose it and come together and show interest in it, then we could basically, just like I said, take each head, kill each head as you go, and just take the beast out, basically. You'd have to do it. You'd have to pre-plan, obviously, because there has to be some kind of stability to step in, and you can't just cancel out like programs that are helping people, basically, or take away welfare and things like that. In the same sense, it's the idea to get the corrupt officials out and then start changing the system with laws that work. That's the idea. That's how people we don't really need so many petty politicians, I believe. I think we need to weed out all these petty politicians, all these petty laws, enact the good laws.
Oh, you're bringing up one of the Georgia Guidestone.
There you go. Yeah, but
you eugenicist! I knew you worked for the Illuminati.
Get rid of the petty laws. It just shows you. Oh, most people would call that like an anarchist or whatever. No masters, no rulers. That was the same sense back then. But there was a lot of societies that worked that way, not really having. They worked more on equality and this. It's the same sense of the working man being just as important as the people that. Basically, the guy that feeds the politician is just as important as the politician. So they need to.
When was that?
I'm sure they had that. They had anytime there's a revolution. I mean, King George said things like that. We can't just be dicks to the peasants all the time, or they're not going to feed us and they'll revolt. Not in those terms, but he definitely was very aware of that. Throughout history, you see, like I said, there's been this control, and if people want to be involved, they have to get involved. That's the idea. They can't be so dependent on the government to do things for them if they realize the government doesn't have their best interests involved and it's corporations leading these governments.
You know what else would be really important and a key ingredient in this transfer of consciousness, essentially, in my opinion? Personal impact, personal relationships. Get out there and actually meet these people. Talk to them. Have a decent conversation with them. Be nice to them. Be respectful. If you go at somebody and attack them, obviously their guard's immediately going to go up, and it's going to be a lot more difficult for them to have a conversation with you. And many times people that are involved in this game that are playing for the wrong side don't realize it. They don't know. And if you go at them and you just, you basically go at them like a freight train, they're going to act accordingly. It's just psychology is what it is. I mean, you really have to present it in a fashion that's non-threatening. You really have to meet people and make a friendship oftentimes, or that personal connection, or at least an acquaintance where somebody's going to listen to you for a minute. And even then, think about how many friends and family that you have, folks, that are close to you, that are oftentimes, in your opinion, the most brainwashed and ones that are the most plugged in. And I'm not saying that in a rude way, and I'm not trying to bring it out that way, but if you really think about some of the people you care about the most, do you often find that they're the ones that are thinking the exact opposite as you? And I'm not saying that's right or wrong. Anybody, if you think something's right in your heart, go with that. If that's what your conscience is telling you, I think that should be your guide. And I certainly wouldn't want to judge you in any other way. But when you look at these people that go against their conscience and what their gut's telling them, oftentimes that's when they start to fall, and the universe will kind of put them back in place and push them back to where they need to be. Whether you want to call it God, divine providence, source, whatever. I mean, there's a lot of different names and a lot of different influences, I think, where they impact people's everyday lives. So, I guess the best thing we could do is really make these personal connections, and also we need to study and research and know what we're talking about. And instead of just reading up a couple of articles saying, if you read a few headlines and you think you know the whole scoop, well, you could get yourself into trouble. You really have to do research and understand these concepts. And if there's a few words that you don't get, hey, look them up. Don't be like, I know what that means, if you really don't. It's something you got to look into. And I think the more education, the more knowledge we obtain, the more we be the change we want to see. That's really what it comes down to, is be the change you want to see. If you do it, somebody else does it, and it turns into this domino effect, and then you've got the 100 monkey syndrome, and you raise the state of consciousness, there's no turning back. Once we bring it up there, you guys, there's no turning back. Think about it for a minute. Every one of you that's listening to this podcast, whether it was 9/11 that woke you up a few months later because you just realized that there was no way that these towers could collapse within their own footprint based upon magical box cutters and these planes hitting the tops of the towers. If you realize, whatever it was for you, that moment that you unplugged from the Matrix, can you plug back in? Can you? I can't. Wouldn't it be nice? What was that guy? He made that comment when he was eating a steak at the dinner in the movie The Matrix, and he's like, please, plug
Cyrus.
Yeah, he's like, I don't want to know. I just want to be plugged back in. This steak tastes so good right now, and I just want to fill this filling again. And so they go, okay, yeah, we'll plug you back in, and all you have to do is give up your friends. He was like Judas in the Bible, right? If you really think about it, it was kind of like that parallel there where he was giving up the Savior essentially for his own benefit, his own pleasure, because he couldn't handle the truth. It was just too much for him. And then there's a lot of people that you try and unplug, and if you do unplug them, they can't take it. They might lose their freaking mind. So you've got to be real.
Bliss.
Yeah, for many people, ignorance is bliss. Once you start to unplug, though, and you finally unplugged, can you really go back? Do you think you could plug back in?
No. Most of all, once you start unplugging and you start realizing, man, this ego, all this image, all these Facebook likes and all this stuff doesn't matter. Here in 100 years, you're not going to be here, and you got your kids and your grandkids left. What are you going to leave for them? You got to create something for them. You have to create. You got to partake. You got to be active. You can't just sit here and worry about your image and what this whole commercial thing that they're doing, man. So once you unplug, no, you can't plug back in. I don't think it works like that. I mean, maybe with medications or going down a dark path, maybe not fully awakening, kind of seeing a glimpse and then just not following your heart, but that's different. That'd be kind of seduction to the dark side almost. That's not, you didn't really fully awaken, I suppose.
Well, and another thing, too, is a lot of people say, Rex, with all this stuff going on, you do so many podcasts, talk to different people from around the world, you discuss doom and gloom so often. How do you deal with it? How are you not just absolutely freaked out underground somewhere doing your shows in an underground bunker? And, I've heard it all before, and I think that we're in this cycle that repeats itself. It's almost like a Groundhog Day effect, and I'm not going to worry about the end of the world. Am I going to be prepared for the worst as best as I can? Absolutely I am. And I've had so many requests to speak my mind about some of the information that I've obtained over the years that I finally decided, okay, I am going to start discussing more of this stuff with people because I do feel that it's important. What we're talking about here, in my opinion, is much more important than other topics that people will put their heart and soul into. But that doesn't mean they're not doing the right thing, because everybody has their path. And what we're talking about here today is just designed to open your mind a little bit, get you outside of the box, maybe step out, look at what's going on around you, take it in, digest it, filter it through your body, and what you feel is important, go with that. If you want to make a change, if you want to start saving up so you can buy a piece of land and grow your own food and maybe pick up a few chickens and a goat or a cow and build your own shelter, that's awesome. The more you can unplug from the system, the better off you are. And if you want to stay in the system, that's fantastic too. Go with your path. Yet I think that if we find this balance with each other and start to work together, I think that that's going to be the most important thing. So like I say, you guys, make these personal relationships with people. Find out who is controlling the markets. Like the stuff that I've been talking to you guys about today, about these corporations and such that control the media, the corporations that control the educational materials that are given to schools, etc. You know, you guys can reach out to the CEOs. You can reach out to the stockholders and the corporations that own the funding companies that have the stocks, etc. There's things that we can all do. We can make connections with the people in Wall Street and the salespeople and those that produce the materials and the industries. I mean, there's so many opportunities that we can take advantage of. And also, we can research what's good and what's bad in our opinions, and we can start to invest in those as well, whether it be not buying gum because you realize now gum has aspartame and phenylenolenics and all sorts of other nasty stuff in it, and you want to get away from those neurotoxins and not be a part of that dark like ecstasy system anymore. Well, put your money somewhere else. That $2 that you spend a day on gum, save that up. At the end of the month, you got $60. At the end of the year, you got $700, $720. Put that into something that you feel could make a difference. I don't know. I mean, I'm just throwing cheesy stuff out here for a minute. But there's got to be little things that we can do to make a difference and an impact instead of just saying, oh, well, you know, I read on the internet about this, so it must be true. Let's go find the truth ourselves and let's create the change that we want to see.
I agree fully with you, Rex, and I'm glad that you're participating and creating and, you know, being a part. You're not sitting back and being a spectator. You're getting off your ass and you're being a part of it, and I appreciate that. You've been inspirational for me, so you know I kind of started my own little thing with you and been bouncing back and forth with you and getting involved more, I guess you could say. So yeah, you definitely inspire many people. Keep it up.
Well, thank you very much. And before we close out tonight, Jason, if you would, for our audience, please let them know again about your YouTube channel, Master Jace. Talk a little bit about some of the upcoming programs you have, and also tell our audience a little bit about the podcast that you recently did that you sent to me that I'm going to release here on the Leak Project in the next 24 hours.
The one you're going to release here is an interview with Dave Dobbs, Dave Fields, writer of the book Laughing Gas. Me and him went over some of the NWO sightings and made a little orbital diagram and went over it in a nice video chat. It should be pretty entertaining. It's pretty long. And in the upcoming things, we're going to talk about Earth history and the Atlanteans and the Anunnaki, basically, whatever you want to call them, and kind of get rid of some of the confusion between some of the researchers out there and the books out there and things like that, kind of draw correlations and give kind of my viewpoint on some things. And yeah, you guys check it out, the channel. It's Master Jace is the channel. It's the Alliance Project is the name of the group we're going to start, I guess, and we're going to take it to make it a platform, I suppose. So yeah, thanks, Rex.
Absolutely fantastic. I wish you the very best. And I'd also recommend our listeners go to leakproject.com. If you want to actually build a profile on Leak Project, it's absolutely free, and you can then get access to content exclusive. It's all ad-free, as well as either streaming or downloadable. Over 200 podcasts. We update them daily, sometimes more than one show. And if you go to leakproject.com, you're going to see some links to Gerald Clark, his website, GeraldClark77.com. If you use the code LEAKPROJECT, you'll get a 10% discount on any product that he has to offer, some awesome books and scrolls and also tonics. And then if you go to artisticvegan.com and use the code LEAKPROJECT, you'll get a 10% discount on any of their product. And one other thing I wanted to talk to you about before we close out tonight is a product called Juice Plus. I have been taking Juice Plus now since 2013. It's just a fruits and vegetables vitamin, essentially, and it's not synthetic. It's 20 fruits and vegetables in a pill, and
awesome.
It is awesome. It's great, and I love this stuff. I used to get it with gummies as well, so I was taking the pills and the gummies, and I was eating them like candy, so I had to quit getting the gummies, and now I'll get these Basically, it's a different orchard blend that goes with the fruits and the vegetables. So now there's more than 20 blends together, and they're all pills because I would go through like a 3-month supply of these gummies in a few weeks. You know, I mean, they're just so good, man. And they're not cheap. They're not expensive, but they're not cheap. And so anyway, so now I do the other option, the orchard blend. But you guys should just check it out. If you go to Leak Project and click on the banner there for Juice Plus, you can actually watch a quick video on it, or you can read about it. And if you want to order it through that link, I can get you a special opportunity with Leak Project as well. We'll give you a year free upgrade membership with all the shows ad-free like I was just talking about. So appreciate everything, you guys. It's really nice to be a part of this with all of you. And I hope you have a wonderful day wherever you are. Be the change you want to see. This is Rex Bear. Talk to you soon. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the New World Order. Inside the Borg and outside the hive mind, this is Rex Bear bringing you the cutting edge in news that is deemed too controversial for the brain-drained media, and yet just enough to keep your minds busy. Since most of you that listen to Leak Project are smarter than the average Joe and Jane. We shall refer to tonight's episode as The Truman Show meets Tron Matrix. We certainly live in amazing times, don't we? Often, people realize the media is controlled by only a handful of megacorporations. But do they also realize most of the educational industry, chemical industries, food industries, pharmaceutical industries, defense industries, even the majority of scientific research is controlled by only a handful of corporations? Some of these megacorps' profits and yearly revenues outweigh countries by billions of dollars. The whole world truly is a stage. Oftentimes people say you must choose a side, and by choosing a side, are you feeding the machine that powers this dualistic matrix most refer to as their daily lives? Could there be another option? Is it possible to unplug from the black ecstasy beast Borg system? Some of the most profitable industries on the planet today profit from lies, deceit, imbalance, destruction, and energy towards hate, division, and illusion. Don't agree? Look at the profit margins involved with pharmaceuticals. Oftentimes, the same drugs cause more damage and problems to the participant than they had prior. How much money does the medical industrial complex rake in every year? What about the chemical companies like Monsanto that help blanket the earth with poisons and toxic chemicals linked to a wide cornucopia of diseases and ailments? Look at the big six that control 90% of the programming, aka entertainment industry. How do these industries profit? While the mainstream media pushes transgender bathrooms, world wrestling politicians acting and jockeying for a position in the bleak house, children are getting arrested for burping in class and suspended for the remainder of the school year in New Mexico. People are turning into lemmings. Have you seen the new Pokemon Go craze? You've got people following artificial relics inside of a 5-inch screen on their phone, getting in fistfights almost with people at veterans' cemeteries because they don't like seeing it turned into a circus. It just blows my mind. And then you go to some of these mainstream news headlines. For example, if you go to MSNBC right now and you look at the top stories from NBC News and MSNBC, I mean, this is the kind of stuff that makes me think of Idiocracy. Let me give you a rundown here. Their number one headline is, "What would it take for the GOP to rebuke Trump?" And then it's, "Gold Star families demand apology from Trump." And then you go to Fox News, and if you read some of the stuff on their front page here, it's all about Clinton. 4 Pinocchios, fact checker, slams Clinton over claim and email scandal. Video, Clinton fact checked on truthful claim in email scandal. Reaction to criticism over Hillary Clinton's statement. It's like two sides of the same coin here. The media's spinning people up on both sides, and they're playing these wag the dog pony games. Most of this stuff doesn't really matter anyway. Where's the real news? Stuff that really matters. Does anybody think that those that are going to be put into the bleak house are actually going to get there based on your vote? Do you think your vote really matters? Jason, it's great to have you on the show with us. How the heck are you?
Doing good, Rex. How you doing?
Oh, I'm doing fantastic. I'm actually looking at an article right now in the Wall Street Journal that says Melania Trump speech used same passages as Michelle Obama's 2008 address. And I listened to that speech, and parts of the speech were exactly the same, identical. Now, if that doesn't make you think we live in the Twilight Zone / Truman Show, lay off the fluoride. What do you think about this kind of stuff and what I was talking about before I brought you on?
Well, I think that's the stuff that people need to be aware of. They don't realize that, the bigger issue and the stuff they hide, it's all about where the camera's pointed, so to speak. And, like you said, wag the dog scenarios. Have you noticed how how political people get around election time?
Oh, yeah. It's amazing.
It's amazing. Yeah, you go to your Facebook and you see all these crazy things, and then you ask them, well, what? Give me some political views or answers. Like, can you give me some answers to some of the problems in the country today? And nobody has answers, and it's funny. No, everybody's so on the fence. It's exactly what they want. It
is exactly what they want. And it's funny because if you just go back a few years, and there was an article that was recently posted on theatlantic.com by Connor Friedersorf. I apologize if I got your last name wrong there, Connor. It's titled, When Donald Trump Lavished Praise on Hillary Clinton. And I actually brought this up a couple of times before, and I've been saying since the beginning that I think they're kind of playing WWE tactics on the TV screen, but behind the scenes they're helping each other out, in my opinion. And you see these videos that come out where Trump essentially several years ago was bragging about how they were friends and how Hillary's a good person and how amazing she is, essentially. And it's not that way anymore. So if he's changed his mind so much in just a few years, and people say, well, he's seen the light and he wants to help us, and you just kind of look at what he said several years ago versus what's going on now, and that, in my opinion, is also like, okay, the whole world is a stage. They're reading the same script, they're saying the same speeches, and then if you read the articles, like, well, they were plagiarizing each other and blah blah. It doesn't add up unless you realize they're probably working in on it together. I mean, what are the interests behind the scenes? Where does Trump has his investments, and how are they being benefited from Hillary? And if she gets in office, what is going to be the implications for Trump and his corporations?
To me, it's all like a big census. It's almost like a way to see that they go left wing, right wing, Democratic, Republican, and then they see where